Welcome to Good Horses, Stories of the American Quarter Horse. I'm Jim Jennings.
And I'm Bobby Loran. We're excited to bring you the stories of the horses that have made a lasting impact on some of the most legendary figures in the quarter horse industry. Each episode, we'll hear about the horses that challenged them, taught them, and left a special mark on their lives.
From remarkable lessons to unforgettable rides, these are the stories that celebrate the heart, soul, and horsepower of the American quarter horse.
This episode is brought to you by Platinum Performance Equine. Platinum Performance Equine was developed by a veterinarian in 1996 to support healing and overall horse wellness. Each bucket equals thousands of hours of research and some of the finest ingredients available in the forms most bioavailable to your horse. Today it's trusted by horsemen like Bud, who uses Platinum Performance GI as his wellness formula. This advanced digestive formula supports total body health through the gut, where 70 to 80% of a horse's immune system lives, with omega-3 fats, antioxidants, vitamins, trace minerals, biosponge, prebiotics, probiotics, and glutamine. It supports everything from digestion to performance. It's even eligible for up to $15,000 in colic surgery reimbursement through Platinum Colic coverage. Learn more at platinumperformance.com or call 800-553-2400.
Welcome to Good Horses, podcast of the American Quarter Horse Association, where we talk about good horses. My name's Jim Jennings, and here with me today is Becky Newell, Editor-in-Chief of the American Quarter Horse Journal, and AQHA professional horseman Bud Lyon.
Hi.
Thanks, guys, for being with us today.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Bud, we just want to talk about good horses. That's
It's my favorite subject.
That's good. That's ours too.
Yeah.
So let's just start it. You have kind of made a career of the ranch riding horses and industry. So tell us kind of how you got started with that.
Well, that's a little bit of a loaded question, Mr. Jim. I think that, a lot of people have said I didn't pick the ranch classes, they picked me. And I think there's probably a little bit of truth in that. But, I grew up in Southern California, and my dad was the horse person in our family who, was sort of the driving influence. And so we grew up, with horses for leisure, and that evolved into, having competitive horses at the 4-H level and doing the open shows, and then we segued into, the AQHA stuff. And so I didn't set out to be immersed in the ranch classes, quite frankly. I sort of fell into it because of my wife, Kim. So she likes to frame it as a love story, so we'll go with that.
Sounds good.
But, having said that, it's been great to me, and we sure do appreciate the opportunities that it's provided us. And so, it's been an amazing ride, and I didn't see it coming, but I'm sure grateful for it and looking forward to seeing what's next.
You've been setting records, then breaking your own records and breaking other records just the last 3 or 4 years at the AQHA World Show. Talk to us about being able to set that first high score when those classes became level 3 world champion classes.
Well, that was really an interesting experience because I won the senior ranch riding for the first time in 2018 on a horse named Chick's Dream About Me. And Chick's Dream About Me was predominantly a reining horse that had made his mark in the NRHA classes. I showed him earlier that year in Tryon, North Carolina at the World Equestrian Games qualifier.
Wow.
And that was in May, I believe. And while I was there, my friend Karen McQuestion was stewarding. And I was warming up, and I, kind of half jokingly, half serious, was trotting around. And I said, "Hey, Karen, what do you think? You think, this one would make a ranch horse?" And she watched it for about 20 seconds, and she said, "Yeah, I think it'd be worth trying," So we took him to his first ranch riding event at the Red Bud Spectacular in June. So that would have been, maybe 5 weeks later And we showed him one day in the ranch riding. He won under all 3 judges and got
Wow.
qualified. And then, quite honestly, we never showed him again for the rest of the year in the ranch riding. We just, I think, did it for fun. And we thought, well, we know we're going to the World Show to show him in the Reining, so we might as well have something else for him to do too, But I don't want to say we didn't take it seriously. I just think we didn't have expectations for him. And so we get to the World Show. Now, I want to preface this by saying this was my 3rd year in 2018 to show in the ranch classes. The very first year I did it, I mentioned my wife, Kim. She had a horse, a smart Chickalina stud that, didn't make a reining horse, and she fell in love with, and she started doing the ranch classes with him and got him qualified in the senior ranch riding. And so in 2016, I was still focused predominantly on the reining and some rein cower stuff. And so Kim says, when it comes time to do the entries, she says, hey, our horse is qualified in the senior ranch riding. I'm going to show him in the amateur, but I don't want to do the senior. Do you want to do it on the senior? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I've never done the event, and quite frankly, I've hardly watched it. I just I show up to watch you, but I really don't know that much about it. So why don't you go ask one of those guys who's really doing it kind of heavy, and she did, and she found someone who agreed to show him, and then in I think mid-October, that person broke his leg. And so, she says, bad news, buddy. She says, our horse is entered and the entry's non-refundable, and, you're drafted. So, I show for the very first time in the ranch riding at the World Show in the senior ranch riding, which is the toughest division, in my opinion, of, all the ranch classes. And show in the prelims, and by the grace of good fortune, I was 3rd in the prelims. Right?
Wow.
What was the horse's name?
Electric Chickalina.
Yeah.
So we still have him, actually. So that's a sore subject, Jim, because we turned down several opportunities to sell him.
And Kim said, no way.
Yeah.
He's my baby.
So we'll get back to Chick's Dream About Me, but I have to give a little context here. So I'm going to show Electric Chickalina in the finals in 2016 of the senior ranch riding. And the only other time I've made a ranch riding run is in the prelims, where I was, the 3rd high score. I get to the finals in 2016, and I was terrible. I mean, I was awful. I mean, if it could have gone wrong, it did. I was, when they go to do the awards, I'm like the first finalist they call off the rail in the award ceremony, But so it was, it gave me a new perspective on the ranch classes and how nuanced and challenging it is, and how it's deceptively difficult to do it well. So we come back the next year, and it's almost the exact same scenario in 2017. I'm showing Electric Chickalina. We go in. I think I was maybe the 4th or 5th highest horse in the prelims, and I am worse in the finals in 2017 than I was in 2016.
And Kim said, "You're fired."
Yeah, I mean, and rightfully so. So, bringing it full circle to 2018, we didn't have any expectations for Chick's Dream About Me. He was, in our mind at that time, he was still a very competitive reining horse, and this was just something we were doing for fun.
Right.
I was still going to show in the ranch riding on other horses, but, I didn't have any expectations for the horse. We called him Artie. His name was Artie. So we get to the finals of the senior ranch riding in 2018. And it's the pattern that they chose is, in my opinion, it's probably the most challenging pattern AQHA has, and it has the most maneuvers, custom patterns aside. So this is a very extensive pattern, and this is a horse that is, very broke and has a great foundation from his, reining training, but he's not a seasoned ranch horse, by any stretch of the imagination. So, we're getting ready to go show, and I'm like, 3 horses away, and I'm practicing this lope to extended trot transition. And I mean, this horse, I cannot get him to commit to the trot. I mean, he keeps loping, he breaks to the walk, he stops, but I mean, it was just, I knew I had to go in there and perform this transition. And, I'm like, now all of a sudden the horse ahead of me is in the chute getting ready to go into the pen, and I still can't get this transition. Finally, right before we go in, he hits it one time. And I said, well, that's going to have to be, that's as good as it gets. And that horse went in and never took a bad step, never made a mistake, never leaned, and so they announced the score, and at the time it was, I think, a 245.5 was a 243 was the record, and he marks a 245.5. So not only is he the new senior ranch riding world champion, but he's also now the new world record holder.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a exhilarating and yet bizarre feeling to have that happen on a horse that you really had zero expectations for, and maybe even I had very little expectations for myself because of what happened in 2016 and 2017. So that horse and that run, that first world championship, it was my first time to win an open world championship. I had a Globe from my youth days, and I had a Globe from my amateur days, but that was the first one in the open, and it was pretty unexpected. So it was just, it holds a special place in my memories and my heart because of the circumstances that surrounded it.
How did you do in the Reining that year?
We made the finals on him in the Reining. I think we were like 5th in the finals or something like that.
Not real vivid memory.
Yeah.
It's the range riding that really did.
It was, I mean, he was great, and he's a wonderful, reining horse, but we were the world champion in the ranch riding.
Amazing.
It was fun. It was really fun. Yeah.
And who did you then pick up from there as far as horses?
Well, I think at that point, all of a sudden, I don't want to say it launched my ranch riding career, because I already had some folks that, that were some clientele that were interested in it, that were sending me horses. But I think it sort of, fast tracked what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I came back in 2019, and we didn't have as good a year. We didn't have the same kind of horses. We didn't have the same kind of luck. I made the finals, I think, of the junior ranch riding, and was just sort of middle of the pack. And then 2020 came, and we had a junior horse named Little Trash Talk.
Mm-hmm.
And Little Trash Talk is gonna trash you out of Dainty's Little Step. And Dainty's Little Step is owned by my good friend Brooke Wharton.
Yes.
And, at the time, Dainty's Little Step was not nearly as well known in some circles as she is now.
Mm-hmm.
But Rigby, as we call Little Trash Talk, was raised by Brooke. She was responsible for choosing that cross, and Brooke was part of the Wagner Ranch at that point.
Yep.
And so Rigby was born on the Wagner Ranch, and grew up there, and has all the little hot iron brands and everything, and
full pedigree too.
Yeah, and so Brooke originally, sent him off to Reining training, and Ben Baldus had him, and I think Ben was maybe the resident trainer at the Wagner Ranch at that time. And Ben had a little bit of success on him as a 3-year-old in some of the smaller futurities, but he just sort of hit a kind of an impasse with the horse's progression in the training. And I think what Ben kind of finally realizes, maybe that horse didn't really want to be a reining horse. He was a good horse, but he just maybe didn't want to rise to that occasion. And so he said he recommended to Brooke that she call me, and Brooke and I were already friends, but he said, maybe you ought to let Bud take a swing at him and see if he'd make a ranch horse. So that's how I ended up with Little Trash Talk in the barn. And then, it was very serendipitous. So we were just talking, Brooke and I had dinner the other night. We were just talking about this. Brooke brings me this horse and says, hey, I've got this horse, and, we want to try him for the ranch riding. But no offense, I don't really do the ranch riding. It's not really my focus. So I think what I ultimately want to do is sell him. And so if you, have someone that would be interested, then, we'd like to sell him. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, let me just get to know him a little bit. And then she calls me a couple weeks later and she says, "How's it going?" I said, "Well, it's going good. I definitely think he has a future at the ranch classes." He's a 4-year-old at the time, I think. And I said, she said, "Well, here's the deal. I really do think I want to sell him." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I've got somebody coming to look at some horses." And she's like, "Great. I'm going to Peru. I'm going to Machu Picchu, and I'll be gone for 3 weeks. So just let me know what happens." And I said, "Well," I said, "Brooke, how do I get a hold of you?" She goes, "You won't." She said, "So I'll just guess when I get back, I'll either still own him or I won't."
Oh my gosh.
So we had somebody come and visit us. Susan Van Cleve is her name, and she's now become a great friend and a valued client. But at the time, she was just a visitor looking for a horse to buy, and she showed up to interested in a different horse than I had, an older gelding that had a little bit more experience, and she rode that one, and she got along with him pretty good. But I just said to her, I said, "Hey, I now that I've kind of met you and talked to you and seen you ride a little bit, I've got this other one that you might want to look at." And she said, "Well, what is it?" And I started to explain it to her. I said, "He's 4 years old." And she goes, "I don't know." She goes, "I don't want a 4-year-old." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Okay, well, I hear what you're saying." I said, "I know we don't know each other very well, but I need you to take my word for this. He's kind of an old soul, and I really think you ought to at least just try him, ride him for 5 seconds. If you hate him in the first 5 seconds, get off. We won't talk anymore about it." She rode him for about 20 or 30 minutes, and she got off, and she bought him. And I'm so grateful she did. Brooke's so grateful that she did. So little trash talk in 2020, we take him to the World Show. We're showing in the junior ranch riding that year, and he goes in, and at this point I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with the ranch classes and the nuances, but so I've got a little bit more experience. But again, you never know in those situations. Well, Rigby goes in and wins the prelims of the junior ranch riding. So then we go to the finals, and he wins the finals. He's the new world champion. I think he broke a record that year. I can't remember. But what was really interesting about Little Trash Talk, he's the only ranch horse that I know of that's done this. He wins the prelims of the junior ranch riding his 5-year-old year. He wins the world championship his 5-year-old year. Comes back the next year as a 6-year-old. Now he's in the senior division, wins the prelims of the senior ranch riding, and wins the world championship in the finals. And to my knowledge, there's not been another horse complete that feat, where they win the prelims and the finals as a junior, and then come back the very next year, their first year in the senior division, and win the prelims and the finals again.
I bet you're right.
Yeah, I bet you are too.
Yeah.
At this point now, had you become known as a ranch horse trainer?
I think that was probably around that time, that's when people are starting to view me through that lens. I don't like to pigeonhole myself or anybody into one thing. We still do the reining and have an active interest in the reining, but I would say we were getting more attention from that demographic, and people were starting to look at us through that prism quite a bit. So listen, I have been so fortunate in these last 6 years with the clients and the horses and the staff that have just fallen into my lap. And I've said many other times, good horses and good helpers have made me look far better than I really am. And please don't tell the helpers I said that. You can tell the horses, but I can't afford the helpers as it is. But yes, I think now that around that time is when people were starting to sit up a little bit and look at me as a ranch horse trainer. So. Not just a reining horse person who did the ranch classes.
Had it become fun?
Yes, but I think that we went through a period where it was really fun when there weren't any expectations.
Yes.
And then when we duplicated that success over and over, then we reached a period where the expectations became unrealistic. And that was really unfair to everyone, mostly the horses. And I think that's, I think I've moved past that a little bit now as a person where, there's still, expectations and I accept that they will always be there. The success begets success. But I think, I try to keep a healthy perspective about it these days. And I think at that point, around that time, it became, it seemed like some folks had the perception that if they sent a horse to Bud Lyon, he was going to rub some magic potion on it, and it was going to be
magic dust.
Yeah, it was going to be, the next record-setting world champion. And, the weight of expectations, it can be crushing sometimes. So, that's really challenging. And I went through a period where I was really frustrated with having to deal with that and dealing with it in a sense that, again, where we started this talk, I didn't seek out the ranch classes. I, for lack of a better term,
sucked you in.
fell into it, right?
Yeah.
And like, some people have said, I didn't pick it, it picked me. And so it was for me, it was a complex sort of state to have to navigate, something that I didn't see coming, but had brought me, great success and great attention, but also had become unrealistic in some respects. And it was not fun for a while there.
That's hard.
I think that I had to figure out how to navigate those waters, and it was really challenging for a while there.
Who was the little gray? Was he stallion? Has a lady that owns him?
Gunner Got Out?
That's him.
Yeah.
He's just a little guy.
Yeah, Gunner Got Out. So our dear friend and client Lynn Walker owns Gunner Got Out, and Gunner Got Out is he was another one of those that very serendipitous. Again, I was still active and am still active in the NRHA and in the reining community. And so every year the NRHA has an auction to benefit the youth, and they ask you, they go around asking all the trainers to donate a lesson or two, So, I've always tried to donate to that because I'm a big supporter of the youth and very passionate about coaching youth and things like that. So, donated these 2 lessons. And it's all online and everything, and I never know who's bidding or not. But I get this email from, this lady from Louisiana, and she says, I bought your lessons, and I actually do the ranch events, but I want to learn a little bit more about the reining. And, I'm kind of cheating. I know I bought it through a reining, auction, but I really want you to help me with the ranch stuff a little bit too, if you can. So I said, sure, come on over, and, so if you've ever talked to Lynn Walker, met her, she is a spitfire.
She is.
And I say that with the utmost love and respect, but also because I want to stay on her good side. So.
Exactly.
But she's a character, and God bless her for it, But it really, I didn't know Lynn before that, and she brings this little short gray pony looking thing. He's almost white, because he's so old now. He's almost white, but Gunner Got Out, he's by Gunner, Colonel Smoking Gun, and he's out of Miss Silver Gun, and or no, I'm sorry, he's a full sibling to Miss Silver Gun, who is also has a fairly well-known name in the reining industry. But I think that Lynn bought that horse out of an online auction as well. Apparently she's big on the online auctions. I just realized
evidently
that,
lessons horse, yeah, she got it.
But she I think had kind of done some research on the horse and felt willing to take the risk. Never swung a leg over him, but she bought the horse in an online auction kind of a deal, as I recall, and got him, and she kept him at home over there in Louisiana. And basically, from the sounds of it, just sort of introduced him to the ranch events and spent a lot of time taking it slow and easy with him and developing this horse. So she brings him over and we take our 2 lessons and it just kicked off this incredible friendship. And I remember we were, at that point, it sort of transitioned to, okay, the lessons were great. What shows are you going to next? Oh, we're going here and here. Well, do you guys mind if I stall with you? No, come on, let's, the more the merrier, but at that point, like, she didn't leave him in training, she really didn't come take lessons regularly, but, she was kind of, in our circus, for lack of a better term. When we would go to the horse shows, she'd stall with us and we'd kind of, give her a few tips here and there and kind of keep an eye on her and give her some feedback and stuff like that. And I remember we're at the NSBA World Show and she says, hey, are you going to the paint world in a couple weeks? And I said, yeah, I think we're going to go. And she said, well, I'm going to be there. Do you want to show my horse? And I said, yeah, I'll show that horse. That, he looks like a fun little toy, Now I haven't ridden him very much and I don't, I've seen him, watched her ride him and stuff like that. But I thought, well, we're going anyways. What the heck, And I did not realize that when Lynn Walker says, do you want to show one of my horses, what she means is she's going to enter you in everything. And I mean everything, so, we get to the paint world and I'm entered in, I'm entered in like the box drive box.
Oh my God.
I'm entered in the, I think they call it ranch pleasure. It's the sign class, I'm entered in things that I've never done. They got like a walk, trot, speed ranch trail competition jackpot.
You're entered in all
I was entered in it, So, so anyways, I'm going along with it, but I'm like, I don't know about all this, Well, she says, do you want to, show him in the ranch trail? I got you entered in it. And I said, well, Lynn, I've never done the ranch trail. And
here we go again.
There's a theme here.
Yeah.
We'll do some analysis at the end of this podcast. but so I remember, it's time to go do the ranch trail. And there was a part where you had to get off and ground tie, and then you had to lead them out at the trot, right? So I'm over there practicing in the warm-up arena, and it's getting close to time when I'm supposed to go over there to the back gate and show, and I can't get this little old gray horse to trot for me in the bridle when I want to leave the ground tie. Every time I try to go, he's just pulling back and just being ornery. And so I said, Lynn's over there watching me and I can see, her blood pressure's elevating because she's just irritated. And she says, hey, that's not how you do it.
To the trainer.
Well, Lynn, I did tell you I've never done this before, and she said, come here. She comes over, takes the reins out of my hands. She says, you got to grab him by the bit. I said, grab him by the bit. And I'm thinking the shank of the bit, So I reach up there and I take a hold of the shank of the correction that he's wearing or whatever. And she says, no, here. And well, she reaches up and grabs the headstall, grabs the leather of the cheek piece of the headstall. She says, you grab it here, you lean forward, you tell him to trot, you get your knees going, and then he goes. And I said, I'm not doing that. That looks ridiculous. Well, of course he did it for her. She'd probably been working on it for 3 years, So I said, I'm not doing that. She said, all right. And I said, oh, fine. All right. One time. I'll do it one time, because we're going to go show. And so, of course, I grab him by the bit, grab the headstall, I lean over, trot, get my knees going, and, off we trot, So I'm like,
oh crap, okay. It worked.
So we walk over there to the back gate of the show pen. We check in, go down the chute of the old Coliseum there at the Will Rogers, go in, win the ranch trail at the paint world, come out. Then I had to go home and teach all my horses at home how to do that. I come out and I said, she said, see, I told you got to grab him by the bit. And I said, Lynn, is that even legal? This is the attorney in her. She says, show me in the rule book where it says you can't. I said, well, you got me on that one. You're a lawyer for a reason, Lynn. I said, so, it's, that little horse, he's cantankerous. He's ornery, but he is just so much fun to show, and he and I, really get along well. And so I think where this is going is, I showed him in 22 in the ranch trail, and I believe he won the prelims in 22, and then goes in and wins the world championship in the ranch trail that year, and comes back the next year. I don't remember where we were in the prelims, to be honest with you, in 23, but I know that we won the finals in 23 as well. So he won back-to-back ranch trail world championships and set the record in 23. So it was very special for me because Lynn had never had a world champion,
Right.
AQHA world champion before, and as gruff and as her exterior can be, to see the emotion that she had in that moment made it so fulfilling,
Yes.
to me. I mean, I was grateful to be the jockey in the saddle and to be the one who got to be, the rider and the world champion. But really, for me, the reward was to see how much it meant to her, and doing it twice was beyond our wildest dreams. And I think that horse, geez, he's got to be 17 years old this year. He might even be 18.
Wow.
I mean, so
Didn't realize he was that old.
yeah, it's
That's cool.
Do you still have him?
Well, he lives at Lynn's house now. To be clear, I have like occasionally partial custody, when there are times where she'll come over and drop him off, and he'll get a little tune up from myself and the staff that works for me, and then we'll go horse show. But I mean, at this point, he's at that age, he doesn't need to be in training full time, and she loves him so much, and it brings her more joy, I think, just to get up in the morning and be able to see him and go pet on him and have him and play around on him. So
Does she show it all?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, she does.
And we a couple years ago we bought her a younger horse. I think she knew Whiskey was getting to the point where he was getting older, and even though, knock on wood, I mean he never took a lame step. I think she just felt like she needed a new challenge and something else, and so we bought her a little bit younger horse, and now that's become something that she's really enjoyed. Going and showing as well, in addition to White Lightning. So,
Yeah.
but
And how cool is it that, you made a connection with her and one horse, and now you've been able to graduate her to another horse and keep her interested, and she loves it.
yeah, I mean, that lady, she just really adores her horses, and she's, I think to me, the thing that horses have brought me are the relationships with the people.
Yes,
And those
absolutely.
have by far and away been the most rewarding thing. I mean, this is a tough business, and sometimes, quite frankly, the people can be the most challenging part. But the flip side to that coin is that you get to meet and develop relationships with people that you would not have otherwise, who become, integral parts of your little, ecosystem. And I think that that's been one of the best things about what's happened in the last few years is we've had an opportunity to develop connections and relationships with people that we just would not have otherwise.
Right. What about let's go to Romeo. There's a story.
Oh.
You've got custody, or you're fighting for custody with Leslie.
No, we don't fight because she knows I have full custody. No, I'm kidding.
She's got the papers, but you've got the
right,
horse.
yeah. No, I'll say this about my good friend and mentor Leslie Lang. I have been very blessed that Bear has never once even broached the subject of taking that horse home. And in fact, at one point, maybe like a year ago, I said to her, I said, hey, Bear, I said, do you want to take Romeo home for a little while? Like, I don't have to show him again for a few months, and you've never really done that. She lives in Colorado and I'm in North Texas. And so I said, would you like to just take him home and enjoy him? I mean, from the day we bought that horse, he's been with me in North Texas, and she just shook her head and walked away. And so, that's a very, very unique even though she's a trainer and I'm a trainer, it's a very unique client-trainer relationship and peer-to-peer relationship. And I don't know this to be fact, but, the only thing I can think of is that, Leslie's mentality is, it's working, so let's keep going.
Don't break
with
it.
Yeah.
So, don't fix it.
So, Sumac Gonna Be Flashy is another horse that, just exceeded all wildest expectations, really. I cannot emphasize enough how unique that horse is. And I know everybody who probably comes on your podcast talks about, how special their horses are. And I no doubt that there's truth to that. I don't throw around that word special lightly or very often, but if there was ever a horse that has earned that title in my program, it would be Sumac Gonna Be Flashy. And that was the case, quite frankly, before he won everything that he's won. That's a horse that, Leslie, I remember we were in Tulsa at a horse show, and she rode up to me, and Leslie and I knew each other, and we weren't very close, but we were friendly and professional, if that makes sense, and I knew her backstory, and I knew how well respected she was in the industry. And so, she and I were just kind of shooting the breeze, and she just sort of casually mentioned, she said, "Hey, I'm kind of on the hunt for a junior horse, for a prospect, or maybe a project, or, something that maybe fell, between the cracks or something like that. So if you happen to see something, keep me in mind." Well, it never even crossed my mind that she was thinking that would be something that she would leave in training with me. I thought she was just talking.
If you see something,
like, hey, I'd appreciate the heads up, So a couple months go by, and, I quite frankly probably forgot about that conversation at the time. And she comes back up and she says, "Hey, have you found us a project yet, or found us a prospect yet?" And I said, "Well, I really haven't seen anything, but I guess I didn't really know that you were serious about that, And so she goes, "Yeah, no, I am." And then she hesitates, and then she looks at me, she says, "You know that whatever I buy, I would want to keep with you, right?" And I,
clarified that whole deal.
No, it never even crossed my mind, because you're a very established, successful trainer who's also doing the ranch events. And I said, "Oh, no, I didn't realize that." And then I immediately felt an immense sense of pressure because,
because it's Leslie.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, as a trainer, I never want to miss for any client, right? When I'm responsible for picking one out or cultivating one, I never want to make a mistake with someone else's money, or, or time or investment or anything like that. And so, but that is amplified when you're talking about a fellow trainer, and it is doubly amplified when you're talking about someone like Leslie Lane, to me. And so, it took me almost a year before I felt comfortable reaching out to Leslie. And this, again, will show you, how I am just purely a victim of good fortune. The way that Romeo came into my consciousness, I was at the Reining fraternity that year, and a trainer named Garth Brown, a reining horse trainer named Garth Brown, sends me a text message, and he says, "Hey, I got a horse I think you need to try for the ranch riding." Now, I don't want to sound dismissive, and I love my reining friends. I do. But I cannot explain to you how many times I hear that in a day, in a week, in a month. And it's not their fault, but many times they just don't know. Now, they are getting more educated, and I think that's changing. And again, hey, reining friends, I love you. I still want to hear about your horses that you want to sell. Don't quit telling me about them.
Just because they don't like reining, they could like ranch riding, but we don't know.
Yeah, that's my question. Would this be, in this case, or in other cases, when they come to you like that, are these horses that just may not be going to make it in the reining, and that's why they're...
I think that there's a little bit of truth in what you're asking. I think really what we're talking about is the foundation that these reining and rein cow horses have from an early age or an early stage of training that really predisposes them to transitioning into the ranch classes
Okay.
and that speed
Second
to
career.
success. So, the ranch classes have provided so much value to our industry and to AQHA and, and it really has benefited people from all different disciplines, horses from all different disciplines. There's so much value in the ranch classes and what they bring to the table. And I think one of those things, Jim, is that we are in an age of specialization. And so you've got horses, whether they're reining horses, cutting horses, cow horses, rope horses, barrel horses, they've all become very specialized, right? When I was a kid, I like to think I'm part of the last generation with AQHA where, you really did a lot of different events and sometimes you did them all on the same horse because that's all you had. And I think I might be the last part of that generation that experienced that before specialization took over.
Yes.
And so getting back to your question, there are certain events that have, like I said, predisposed themselves to a horse transitioning into the ranch classes a little easier and a little faster in regards to speed to show pen participation. Now, that doesn't mean that, horses from other backgrounds or other areas can't compete in the ranch classes, because we do see all around horses. We do see horses crossing over from, that are also rope horses. We see horses, cutting horses sometimes. But I think the body control and the fundamentals that we start putting on those 2-year-olds when they do the reining and the rein cow horse really are the building blocks of good horsemanship, if done right, and good fundamentals. And that, when you've got collection and softness and lateral movement and elevation of the back and shoulders and hip control, and you can independently manipulate all those parts, or you can put them together in combination and move the hip and the rib cage at the same time. That makes my job so much easier when I go to transition a horse into the ranch classes, because the fundamentals of the ranch riding and the ranch trail really do rely on all that, all those core principles that we just talked about. Now, I'm not saying a horse that comes from a cutting background can't do that, or a horse that comes from one of those other backgrounds. What we have personally experienced is that those horses, because of the nature, the culture of their disciplines, that stuff is not, those horses don't have that foundation, or, they don't require the same things that we do. And so I think those horses can still go on to be successful, competitive ranch horses. I think it takes a little longer sometimes to get there. So, going back to sumac to be flashy, Garth Brown, reining horse trainer who I've known for a long time, he texts me while I'm at the reining fraternity and he says, I have this horse I think you need to look at for the ranch riding. And I don't want to say I ignored Garth, but I had a lot going on at the reining fraternity, but I might have kind of pushed it aside, Thank God Garth didn't wait for me. He just started sending me videos, and, these videos are popping through or whatever. And finally I get to a place where I can take a breath at the reining fraternity. I'm like, all right, Garth, what do you got here? And I know that sounds so condescending, and I don't mean it to be. It's just, like I say, I mean, it's become a little bit of a thing where some people think that if it won't make X, it'll definitely make a ranch horse. And that's not exactly how it works, right? So anyways, I opened the very first video of Romeo, and I think he's loping around, and I went, ooh. Open the next video, and he's trotting around, and I go, huh. Look at the third one, and he's doing some of the reining maneuvers, and I said, yeah, that's probably one I need to try, So I messaged him back. I said, look, here's the deal. I'm at the reining fraternity, and he's like, yeah, I'm coming up there too. And I said, so how about, can we get together when I get home? And so I get home, and he's like, I got to run to town. He lives not far from me. He said, I got to run to town and do some errands. How about I just drop that horse off for a couple hours and you do whatever you feel like you need to do? And then just call me when I need to come pick him up, which is also a very unorthodox situation, you know?
You're like, yeah, let me drop everything for that.
That's not really how that normally goes. Usually it's like, okay, we'll set up an appointment. I'll come to you, you know, I'll watch you ride him, then I'll get on, you know, then we'll see where it goes, you know. Anyways, but Garth, he was awesome, you know. He just said, yeah, I got to run into, I think he was going to the tack store or something, you know. He said, I got to run to the store, so I'll just drop him off. I'll run my errands, and you just let me know. So drops him off and leaves him with us and then goes to town, you know. And so I ride this horse, and at the time, my youth rider, Madison Rafus, was staying with me. And Madison at this time, I think she was 12 or 13, so she really thought she had it all figured out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring this up because I hope she sees this, because she hates when I tell this story, right? So, you know, a 13-year-old little girl, you know, has some opinions. And definitely one, you know, who grew up as the daughter of 2 horse trainers.
Yes.
So Madison's there. She's staying with us because her mom can't take her anymore. And so all right, yeah, send her over. We'll, you know,
we'll put her to work.
Yeah. So Madison's staying with us, and Garth drops Romeo off, and I'm riding around, and Madison's watching me, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is what I've been looking for, you know? And I look at Madison and I go, what do you think? And she says, he's just okay.
13-year-old girl.
He's just okay. And in light of what we know now, I love to bring that story up every opportunity I get. And now I make sure any horse that I have that I'm interested in, I run it by Madison first. Because if she doesn't like it, I'm immediately buying that horse. But I called Leslie, and you know, again, it had been like a year since Leslie had you know, I told her I would be on the lookout. I said, hey, I think I found one. And she said, okay, well, you know, do what you think. And so I said, I think what we need to do is set up a pre-purchase exam. And so Garth called and he said, you know, when should I come get him? I said, I think you should just leave him here for a little while. We're going to do a pre-purchase on him. So, you know, I know this is long-winded, but I think that horse, you know, he really kind of fell into my lap in some respects. And you know, he's gone on to do amazing things. And, you know, I don't know what the future holds for him, but I do know that if that horse never wins another thing, then, you know, we're very content with what he's already done for us.
Yeah. So. And Leslie has yet to ride him.
No, that's not exactly.
Okay, so she has ridden him.
She has ridden him. Okay. You could, like, less than, like, you don't even need all 5 fingers, right? She did get to show him one year. Where did she show him? Somewhere, I think maybe like the ranch trail, like maybe the first year they had it or something. He was like a, you know, a green 4-year-old, and I couldn't justify showing him at that time. I don't think they'd split the junior and senior, and so I could only show you know, 4 of them, and I couldn't justify showing him. So Leslie showed him, but she like basically catch rode him and then went and made the finals on him. So I mean, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have let her do that. I think she beat me on a couple of them, so on a couple of my own. But anyways, but yeah, Leslie has, you know, I mean, I think, you know, obviously she's a professional. She gets it. She understands. She's been around long enough to know. And I think but that's the dream as a trainer, right? You know, in some respects, I just got done saying how much I love the people and love the relationships I've formed, but it's very unique and special to have someone own the best horse in your barn who's very hands off and just, you know, I consult her often as a mentor, but I think that very rarely, you know, do I feel like I have to run anything by her as it pertains to Romeo.
Did you go straight to ranch riding with him, or did you show him in some other areas?
So Leslie's, you know, interest was mostly the ranch classes, and she was not necessarily opposed to the reining, but I think it wasn't, you know, it wasn't high on her priority list. So we started out just transitioning him to be a ranch horse. And There were some things that needed a little bit of tweaking. A lot of the reining horse community does not actively teach their horses to long trot. Some do just for exercise or warm-up purposes, but, there's not a lot of concentration on quality of movement and, stride length and that kind of stuff. And so we knew we were going to have to work on that a little bit, and we did have to. There were some things that no one did a poor job training him as a reining horse, but their focus, rightfully so, was in other areas. The stopping, the turning, the circles and that kind of stuff. So in the beginning, his 4-year-old year, we just focused on the ranch stuff, and what was really interesting is we knew that he had a lot of talent, but he would flash that talent, but it was also fairly inconsistent early on. And I think that's probably why he didn't have more success as a reining horse. And he was started in Canada, or foaled in Canada, started his 2-year-old year by a trainer in Canada named Matt Hudson, who is does a great job, as far as I'm concerned. Sean Flaherty came along with a client and purchased him, his 2-year-old year, and they brought him to the States. Sean trained him up from there and showed him one time at a small futurity in at the end of July of his 3-year-old year. And he won a little bitty check, I want to say $72 or something like that. But that, he must have underperformed, and Sean and I have talked a little bit about this. We did Andrea Fapani's symposium together back in January, and so I had Romeo there, and we kind of got a good laugh out of it. I said, I'm sure glad you hated my horse. He's like, I didn't hate him. He just wasn't, very consistent, which adds up. So again, it for Sean Flaherty's level in the reining at the level 4, you have to have a very special horse, and so he's trying to find that elite 3-year-old athlete, and some horses just don't develop, at that rate. And so we got to be the beneficiary of that, thank goodness. And so, but we did experience a little bit of I think probably what Sean did too, is that horse was a little inconsistent. He'd flash, some very high level elite and natural ability, and then he would maybe underperform a little bit. And then you get another couple of good runs out of him, and then he'd, underperform. So that his 4-year-old year and his 5-year-old year, we just did the ranch stuff on him. And, I think he was an NSBA world champion. I think he won the Congress. He did well at the Sun Circuit, a lot of major events. But his 4-year-old year and his 5-year-old year, I thought he was my best junior horse. And we got to the World Show, and the first year, I think he made it into the finals, and then, underperformed in the finals. And I think that second year, he didn't even make it to the finals. So that was frustrating. To have a horse that you think can be elite and then, not be able to capitalize on it was frustrating. And it was at that point that I said to Leslie, I think we should go back to doing the reining on this horse. And the theory was, number one, I think he's a little, he needs to do something different than the ranch classes for a little while, because that's all we've done basically for the last 2 years. But number two, I think doing the reining will make him appreciate the ranch classes a little bit more. And by that, I meant, when he has to run and slide, and he has to turn more than one time, and he has to, run circles and maybe work a little bit physically harder in some respects, or maybe it's a little bit more mentally challenging for him. Then when you back down and do the same fundamentals, but do them in a different way, he really just appreciated the ranch classes. And that, to me, ended up being the magic formula for that horse. I think he just mentally needed to grow up and mature a little bit. I think he was a late maturing mental horse, mentally speaking. But I think also incorporating that reining back into his training program, it really benefited both disciplines, because, doing the reining on him made him appreciate the ranch classes, and doing the ranch classes made him better in the reining, So they worked, in symbiosis a lot. And it was at that point, that his trajectory really just, shot off. And so we've really had the good fortune, at this point, he's been a world champion in the working Western rail. He's been a world champion in the ranch trail. He's been a world champion in the ranch riding. He set the record in the ranch riding. So, there's just not anything in some respects left for him to accomplish. Now, we're happy to keep doing it, again. But like I said earlier, to me, he's exceeded our wildest expectations.
And he did compete in reining toward the super horse, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. And what was he? Top 10?
He was sixth.
Sixth.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So he ends up winning the super horse, and that was also kind of interesting the way that played out, because Leslie and I never once had that conversation.
Right.
The reason why that horse was even eligible for 3 categories was because he got qualified in the aged geldings, not the performance where he belonged, but in the aged geldings.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he get qualified in the aged geldings? Because when you show at the Arizona Sun Circuit, they give a saddle for the all-around ranch horse.
Oh.
But in order to, you're not required to, but in order to, everything you show in all the ranch classes and the conformation classes count towards the saddle. So if you don't show in the conformation classes, you might get beat just because you didn't have as many points, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're at the Sun Circuit a couple years ago, and I said, I guess it was 2024, and I said, hey, Bear, do you want to, Romeo's sitting pretty good for this ranch circuit saddle, but somebody kind of needs to take him into the halter. And so she says, well, I've got one to show for a client in the performance halter, but I can take him in the aged geldings. And I'm thinking, well, that sounds like a terrible idea, but whatever. Shows you what I know, because he goes in there and, he's like second on a couple of cards and gets qualified, right? Wins the saddle, whatever, perfect. The halter is out of sight, out of mind for me, We get to the World Show last year, and he's qualified in the working Western rail. He's qualified in the ranch riding. He's qualified in the ranch trail. He's qualified in the reining, right? The super horse, it's never been a topic of conversation. It hasn't been on my mind. But we go there. He wins which one was first? Was it the ranch trail? I can't even remember.
I can't remember either.
I think it was maybe he wins the ranch trail first, and then he wins the working Western rail.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes in the ranch riding, arguably his best event. He's the defending world champion and world record holder, and he doesn't even make the finals. So we know we've got the reining left, but he's had a great show already, because he's won 2 world championships or whatever, and we know we've got the reining left. And so I cross paths with Leslie, and she says, she says, I'm gonna come get Romeo and practice because he's got the halter tomorrow. And I said,
you went halter?
Huh? I said he's in the halter? I go, how is that even possible? She goes, well, remember I showed him at the Sun Circuit and he got qualified. And when I was doing the entries, I just thought, why not? And she said, you never know. He might be eligible for the super horse or something. She's very sneaky. She's very calculating. That Leslie.
She's a pro.
Yes. And I said, and I could not wrap my head around it. I could not wrap my head. This shows you how dense I am. This is why I ended up a horse trainer, apparently. So I was like, what are we even doing? We're going to show Romeo in the aged geldings at the World Show. And I remember I said, Bear, it finally kind of clicked. I said, Bear, you mentioned the super horse. Is he in the running for the super horse? We're 2/3 of the way through the World Show, right, or more at this point. And she says, yeah, he's in there. And I said, like
where?
She says, well, he's leading it.
No pressure.
Right. So she goes in, she shows in the age geldings, there's 12 in it. She's 11th, as he should have been, right? All the real halter horses are in there.
Yeah. How do you beat Dan Fox's big gelding?
Yeah, right. So, yeah, I gave Dan a hard time. I said, we almost had you.
By 10.
This close, right? Yeah. Yeah. But we checked that box, right? Because you got to have at least three categories for the super horse. So now the only thing we have left is the reining. And I'm all of a sudden sweating bullets because when I didn't even know it was a possibility, I was, just as happy as could be with the way our world show is going. And now I'm starting to think about what's possible and about how I may never be in this position again. I never dreamed I'd have a super horse contender. Growing up, it wasn't something that I even imagined I would be in a position to do. So now here's this opportunity that's presented itself. By God, it might never come around again. I don't want to drop the ball. And so Leslie's doing the math and we're getting ready to show in the reining. And she says, if you're seventh, or you got to be better than seventh. And then I think if you are, then I don't think anybody can catch us.
And you're like, okay.
Now, I like to think that I thrive on pressure, but I don't ever want to go through that situation again. And let me tell you, we went in, he marked like a 19 and a half. He was good, not great, but he was good. I ended up 6th place, and the roar of applause that went up in the award ceremony for being 6th place, because we knew that put him, out of reach. I've never been so happy to be 6th place in my whole life. You know what I mean?
Oh, that is cool. So you mentioned Madison, and she's had a lot of success with Whizzen Boons Mall.
Mm-hmm.
You won the senior ranch riding with him last year. Yep. Said it was the last the only AQHA World Championship he didn't have on his resume.
So yes, he had never been an AQHA Open World Champion.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah. So that Whizzen Boons Mall is a horse, another Canadian bred horse, ironically. Shout out to the Canadians. Yeah. So, you guys keep making nice horses. Yeah, keep sending them to me. It's working. No, so Whizzen Boons Mall is a horse that, I had known Madison's parents for, quite a long time. And I'd watched Madison, ever since she was itty bitty. And, she had that horse, and their focus was the reining. And, to that effect, I think Whizzen Boons Mall is only, I want to say he's like $5,000 short of being, winning $100,000 in NRHA money.
Yeah.
These days, he doesn't show in the reining very much. They show him very sparingly. He's obviously, become a phenomenal ranch horse. But yeah, Madison kind of, was on my radar because, when you see a kid that small and that talented, it's hard not to notice somebody like that, and then on top of that, you pair somebody like that with a horse that, has that kind of ability. And I just remember being somewhere, maybe it was the Reining Futurity or the NRHA Derby, and I remember watching her ride this thing around, and it just occurred to me, like, and I said it sort of offhandedly, hey, you guys, decide that you want to, do something different with that horse or add something to his repertoire, you might need to consider doing the ranch stuff on him, because, he's awfully good mover. And seems like, that would be something that he could excel at. And they bid on it. I mean, I think two things happened. Like, when I first said it, I don't think it was really on their radar. I don't think they were, they weren't super invested in it. They were like, oh yeah, that'd be cool, but whatever. But I think, really what happened is Madison, about the time she got 12 or 13, she got to be a handful. And I remember Shannon, her mom, called me and she said, okay, here's the deal. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to kill her, or we're going to kill each other. And she won't listen to me. And she seems like she's terrified of you. So I'm going to send her to your house, and maybe you can get through to her, and I'll send the horse with her. And so, I grew grew up, having some really great mentors in AQHA and in the youth riding programs that I was in. So to me, this was sort of a full circle moment.
Absolutely.
And so I said, yeah, fine, send them on and just send me your kid and your credit card, and we'll take care of the rest. So that's how it just became kind of a regular thing, and Madison came and the horse came, and we started teaching him to do the ranch events, and we started teaching Madison. Really, the first year I helped her at the Youth World, I really got I think I got 2 days to work with her. She was there to do the reining, and it was sort of like she was still in the 13 and under, and the ranch stuff was kind of an afterthought, but she's entered, so yeah, we'll go ahead and do it. Well, I got 1 or 2 lessons with her at the Youth World, and then she goes in there and she's reserve in the 13 and under ranch riding, which speaks volumes about the horse and the rider.
They have a partnership.
And I remember I said to her, after she was reserved that year in the ranch riding, and again, it was very unexpected. I don't think anybody, parents, kid, myself had any expectations, and so it was great. But I said, I got 1 day or 2 days to help you. I said, imagine what I could do with a whole week.
Yeah. Mom said, I'll give you the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I should have asked more questions, I think. So, but no, that horse, also, he's a combination of, natural ability and foundation and nature, nurture, whatever you want to call it, that all lends itself to being very, very good at the ranch classes. And Madison was able, she's been super successful. I mean, you probably know better than I do. I was trying to think how many world championships she's won on him, but it's at least 3 or 4.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
If not more.
I had 5 in my head, but I may be wrong.
So, very rarely do I get to keep that horse in training. He lives and truthfully, Madison is kind of his person. I mean, she can get him to do things that none of us can get him to do, not her mom and dad who are trainers, not myself. She can really get him to in some cases, perform better than I can. And I don't keep him in training. He lives at her house, she will send him over and we'll kind of have him leading up to, sometimes the big events. It just depends on the schedule and whatnot. But the situation we found ourselves in with Peter, as Whizzen Boons Mall is known, is that, that horse, I showed him at the Congress and I won on him at the Congress. I showed him at the NSBA World and I won on him at the NSBA World. But every year we went to the AQHA World Show, we just didn't have the right run on the right day. And that's such a big part of it sometimes, I mean, you can have the best horse in the country, but you got to have the right run on the right night.
Mm-hmm.
And, it doesn't always work out that way. So I think the first year I showed him at the World Show, I want to say I was 4th or 5th. And the next year I was 7th. And then I didn't even make the finals one year. And so, last fall, we go to show him and I don't want to take anything away from Whizzen Boons Mall. But, I think, we know that Romeo's not made the finals, right? So, okay, there's probably our best and most consistent, most reliable horse. He's not even in the conversation, So I've got Peter in there, and I've got Katie Fox's double tapping in there, LJ as we call him. So I've got 2 pretty good bullets, but both those horses are a little quirky and can sometimes be a little opinionated about things, and so. I remember, telling Madison, hey, before the finals, she was there and I said, here's the deal. I think in order to win, I'm going to have to call on your horse tonight, and we know how that goes, right? I mean, it might work or it might not, but I don't think the way this final seems to be shaping up, I don't think I can be conservative and be the world champion. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is, the 4th or 5th year I've tried showing this horse here, and he's getting a little older. He's still, great. But I'm in the back of my mind, I think I'm wondering, I don't know how many more chances I'm going to get with this particular horse, right? Like you just never know. And so, we I went and showed and let it rip, and it hung in there, and he ended up the world champion. And not to take anything away from any of my other horses in the barn or my clients or my world championship wins, but I was so relieved to be able to check that box, and because it was just gnawing at me a little bit that I hadn't been able to to accomplish that one last thing, and I really wanted it for the horse is what I think that speaks to. I certainly wanted it for the family, but I really wanted it for that horse because that horse deserved to be an open world champion.
Yeah, for sure.
But you mentioned a while ago the mentors that you had as a youth.
Yes, sir.
Talk about that. Talk how how did you get started showing horses and the horses that you had in the beginning? Because we know you were a reserve youth champion.
Yes, sir.
Youth world champion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So my family was originally rooted in Louisiana, and my mom and dad grew up there. Went to where they were high school sweethearts. Went to college together, and when they graduated from college, my dad took a job with Purina in their sales division, and we moved all over the Southeast for a little while, and then we ended up making our way to Southern California in the late '80s, and I don't know. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know exactly how accurate this part is, but it's my interpretation of how it went.
Okay,
so I might be an unreliable narrator, but this is the way I feel like this transpired. We got to Southern California, and it's a different type of lifestyle. And my dad is kind of a good old boy from Louisiana, and I think my dad looked around and went, well, I can't relate to some of this other stuff these kids are doing, surfing and skating. Not that he was opposed to it, but I just think he didn't have any personal experience with it. But there was this little bitty 4-H farm not far from where we lived. It was on the University of California, Irvine's campus. And it was this little anomaly. And we found that 4-H farm, and my dad's like, yeah, I don't know about some of these other stuff, but I can relate to this, right? And so he had grown up with horses. We had dabbled in the horses a little bit when we were still, in the Southeast, and we got to Southern California, and I think, he consciously or subconsciously shepherded us to the horses and that direction. And that's what we did as a family unit. My sister, was into it. My mom was kind of the hostage. My mom was the non-horse person of the family, but she was a great show mom. But, we started out, like I said at the beginning, we were doing the 4-H shows, and we were doing the little open shows, and then it just progressed from there. I think that, I would imagine that, my dad saw that, hey, my kids are legitimately interested in this, and, some families do baseball, and some families do cheerleading, and some families do, whatever. But we did the horses, and I think the longer we did it, the more you realize, okay, they're serious about it. So we just sort of gradually moved up. It went from doing the 4-H and the open shows to, okay, now we're going to go take lessons from these professional trainers at our local boarding stables. Because in California, Southern California especially, there's not the real estate or the facilities to have a horse in your backyard, right? So a lot of our trainers worked out of public boarding facilities, specifically in Orange County. And so we did that for a while. We got introduced to some people who were playing at the local level at the quarter horse shows, in California. And, it was just sort of stepping stones, I think. And at some point it was like, okay, maybe we've outgrown this situation or this chapter or this trainer, and now it's time to move up a level, and we just kept doing that. And I think around the time I got to be like 13 years old, my dad he never asked me if I wanted to do it. He just started volunteering me as free help to trainers, which I think is really bold, in this day and age, but we'd be standing around at a horse show somewhere, and, he'd just ask some person that he hardly knew, but he knew was a good trainer or a successful trainer. He'd be like, hey, do you need any free labor this summer? Because Bud's not doing anything. He's like, whoa.
You didn't even ask.
Wait, hey, I definitely had plans this summer, and I was going to be on the beach some. I can promise you that. I was going to be chasing girls or whatever, but I was going to be doing something. But, I think two things happened. I think my dad realized that, if I really wanted to, if I was serious about it, which I seemed to be, meaning the horses, and if I really wanted to elevate my skill set, then immersing me in that environment was the way to fast track that and the best way to do it. I also genuinely believe he wanted to get his preteen son or teenage son out of the house as much as possible.
And away from the girls.
Away from the girls, maybe, but definitely out of his hair.
Yeah.
So that's really when it started to take on a life of its own. So, pretty soon I'm going and spending a summer in Temecula, California, and at this time we're doing the all-around horses. So, but Dana Hokana was my kind of first major AQHA trainer, and Dana did a great job for us, at the time, and she found us a horse named Perfect Tommy. And don't ask me how that horse was bred. I know I should know, but I can't remember for the life of me. So
that was a long time ago.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Appreciate that. So, but this kind of plain sorrel gelding, we showed him in a little bit of everything. I learned to do the showmanship. I dabbled in the trail. I dabbled in the Western riding. I did the pleasure on him, and we went to the West Coast Circuit, which was in Pomona, California, one year, and in those days, like at least in California, AQHA was a much bigger deal than like NRHA was, right? So, and when you would go show, there was kind of a little circuit, meaning a circuit of different shows all around the area, the region that people would go to. So you do Pomona in January, and then maybe you'd go to the Sun Circuit in Scottsdale, and then maybe you'd go to the Blue Ribbon Circuit in Tucson, and then we had some shows in Bakersfield, and we'd go to places like Del Mar, and we'd do Santa Barbara. And we do, Temecula, the DLR ranch in Temecula, hosted some shows, and we'd go to Rancho Marietta. So, that's kind of what everybody did. There was some NRHA stuff there, but it wasn't established as much at that time. And we're doing, the all around stuff these days anyways, but we go to the West Coast Circuit, and I, was fortunate enough to have a great show and send the horse back to Temecula with Dana, and he gets into a little bit of a bind, gets injured, needs to have some time off. And in the meantime, my dad had bought this big, first little beginning reining horse, right? I think he paid like $6,500 for it, which was a lot of money at the time, maybe, but it was a starter horse basically. And he did it because every time he bought himself, a pleasure horse or all around horse, his kids kept stealing them. So I think he said, I'm going to do something out of the box, and then, they can have their toys and I'll have mine. Well, when this other horse has to take a break from training, I'm down in the dumps. I'm feeling like, I just got the rug jerked out from underneath me, and we're finally hitting our stride. And now I'm going to have to take a break, and I don't have anything to ride and show. And my dad says, all right, well, I've got this, this little reining horse. Why don't you take this and go try this reining deal? And I did. And by the time the other horse was ready to go back to training, a year later, we ended up selling him. And my career, I would say my youth career, just diverged. And we started doing the reining, and I think that, this ties into your original question, Jim, which was, my mentors. We got to a point where my dad said, okay, we need to find you a reining horse trainer now that goes to some of these bigger shows. And we were getting some lessons, some beginning lessons and stuff like that. And we kind of moved on from that situation. And so somebody recommended Todd Crawford to him, right? And perfect. Todd was at the DLR ranch in Temecula. And, at that time, Chris and Vicky Benedict were there. And so, my dad's like, well, we've been going to Temecula anyways when we had the other horse with Dana. So, here we go again.
This was nothing different.
Yeah. So, he would drive me, before I got my license, he would drive me to Temecula a couple times a week. And, I'd take a lesson 2-3 times a week with Todd. And then, I got my license, and pretty soon I'm driving myself to Temecula and doing that, and then it's like, now I'm getting volunteered to be, free labor for Todd. And, as you guys might know, Todd has an elevated work ethic, and I think that it was at that time, he was a younger guy. See what I did there, Todd? So he he's always been a very driven person, but at that time he was extremely driven. And so I lived on Todd and Pam's couch, for I think a couple of summers. And, we'd get up and go to work at, 3, 4 in the morning, and come home sometimes at, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and do it all over again. And sometimes Todd, he'd be wrapped up and focused, and laser focused in his own little world. I mean, he might not say 2 words to me all day. Mm-hmm. But what I think I learned, at least, in part through osmosis, was just the work ethic involved. Mm-hmm. And, I'm no doubt I learned a lot from him about the technical stuff, the mechanical stuff, all that. Lord knows I took a lot of butt chewings. So hopefully some of it sunk in. But he was probably the first one that I think really influenced the foundation and the training principles that I still carry today, So I rode with Todd, mostly through high school, and then went off to Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo. And while I was there, Nellie Murphy was also enrolled.
Oh, yes.
Now, I had known Nellie since I was like a senior in high school. We had crossed paths at the quarter horse shows and stuff like that, and at that time, her dad, Don, who's in the NRCHA Hall of Fame, and Don's considered the horse trainer's trainer. He was based in Northern California. And so Nellie and I, having known each other from the horse stuff, and, developed a friendship while we were both at Cal Poly, and Nellie started inviting me to, come home with her on the weekends, or, school breaks and stuff like that. And so then I went and spent a couple of summers, riding at Don's, and again, those 2 guys just, I cannot I didn't understand it at the time, but now today, I don't even know if I can fully articulate how much I learned from them. I'm sure they didn't think so in the moment, but to me, it was a good reminder that, hey, if I'm any example, the kids are listening. It may not always translate into, performance right away, but they are listening. And I know that because I might not have been able to execute whatever it was they were trying to get me to do, but I understood the concepts, sunk in, and I was able to apply them later on in my life, So, I would say, just to wrap up, where this all started, Jim, the third person in my life that really, had a huge influence was Randy Paul. And after I graduated from Cal Poly, I went to work for Randy, and I spent 7 years working for Randy when he was in Scottsdale. And it was a really, unique time to be there, because Randy had just, he had his own business, but he had just been hired by Pat Warren to be the resident trainer at Rancho Cerrillo.
Wow.
So, I got there, and Rancho Cerrillo, the facility that we were at, that now Andrea Fapani, has, it was brand new at the time, and it was like equine Disneyland, and so you had this amazing facility. You had, some of the best livestock in the country. And then I had the fortune of being, learning from Randy and learning from the people in that area, because one of the things that happened, frequently, was almost like a think tank of trainers who would get together and ride together and share ideas and things like that. So it was a phenomenal time to be there and to work for Randy. While I was there, he won the world show multiple times. He won the Reining fraternity. He was third at the cow horse fraternity. So I think that, those three guys, I mean, and I'm not excluding Dana. Dana taught me a lot about, the mechanics and about the basics that, sometimes I think are overlooked these days with kids. And so, she helped lay that foundation. Todd taught me so much. Don taught me so much. And then, Randy taught me everything he could, I think, until he got sick of me. But no, it was those people really, allowed me to take, that stuff and apply it to what I'm doing today in the reining and the ranch classes.
What was the horse that you won the Reserve Youth World on?
So that was a mare named Lulu's Freckles. And Lulu's Freckles was, I don't like the word reject. I don't know why that word just bothers me for some reason. But she had, I guess they would have called her a reject cutting horse, right? So Todd was given the task by my dad, like, hey, we've had this beginning reining horse and it's not going to get us where we want to be. We need something that Bud can step up and grow with and have a shot to be a little bit more competitive. And Todd said, well, I think I know where there might be one. He said, a guy sent me a horse that was a cutting horse that didn't really want to be a cutting horse. And I trained it for a little while, and then she got hurt, and the guy took her home, and he's just had her in his backyard. And he said, let me call that guy and see if he'll sell that mare, right? And I remember we drove out there to this guy's place, and, he's just got his house and his little, half-acre lot and his little, 1-stall, 2-stall barn, whatever it is, and then he's got like, it's not even really an arena. It's just like, some dirt that they put some temporary lights. Like, I think we had to shine the headlights of the truck onto the dirt to try to be able to see enough, and we ride this mare and, again, I mean, not that this is an insignificant amount of money, but I think we paid like $10,000 for this horse, which was a lot of money to us and a lot of money to a lot of people, and we give, I shouldn't say we, I didn't have anything to do with it. My dad gave $10,000 for this mare, but I remember the selling point, or the part that closed the deal for us, I'm sure for my mom, it felt like a lot of money and a big roll of the dice. And my mom looked at Todd and she said, if we don't buy this one, is there something else that you can find us for less money? And I remember Todd's response was, well, ma'am, if you don't buy this one, I'm going to sell her to or I'm going to buy her for somebody.
Wow.
So that was kind of like,
he had confidence in her.
Yeah. And I think that's the part that sealed the deal. So, Lulu's Freckles, went on to be, a very special horse in my life. And I showed her, in the reining, and we were reserve world champion in the reining. I think that was one of the last years it was maybe in Fort Worth. And then, I went off to college. My sister took a turn on her. I got a little, not homesick, but I think I was missing the horses, that first year or so I was in school, I wasn't getting to do the horses very much. And so, I think, I got the opportunity to show her again as an amateur and won a world championship on her in the amateur reining.
On the same mare.
That's a deal.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, we kind of retired her from the show pen after that, and we started breeding her and raising babies out of her. And so, she was instrumental in shaping, I think, my career, because she allowed me to get to a place that I hadn't been able to get to before, and taught me a lot of lessons about horses. That mare was beautiful to look at and extremely talented, but didn't really like people. And she wasn't mean to be around by any stretch, but she did not care for people really.
Wow.
And so, you had to figure that out about her. Like, she was, you took her out of the stall, you saddled her up, you went and practiced, or you went and showed, and she was all business. Mm-hmm. But to be loved on, no, wasn't her thing.
Wow.
She wasn't like what people would call a marish mare, right? But she just didn't want you in her space, really. Yeah. She just was like, she'd go over and kind of hide in the corner and be like, so, but the things that she allowed me to accomplish probably helped inspire me on some level to go into training horses as a profession. I mean, the fulfillment that I got, the enjoyment that I got, the rush of adrenaline that I got, when I was able to accomplish those feats, I think, and it probably helped push me towards that direction a little bit. And I think by that time, after I won the amateur reining in 98, I was maybe a junior in college at that time. And I think I knew that, okay, when I get out of school, I'm going to give this a try and see where it goes.
So when you left Randy, is that when you opened your own barn then?
Yes, sir. Well, yes. So that road gets a little rocky at this point in the story, but I worked for Randy from 2000 to 2007. And, I think we got, after about the fourth year, Randy and I kind of, every year we'd kind of have that little check-in conversation like, hey, you staying, you leaving, what you thinking, you good, I mean, 7 years it's pretty unheard of, I think, for an assistant to stay one place, and especially these days. But I just enjoyed being there. I enjoyed working for him. I had other opportunities to go other places. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been good experiences, but I just enjoyed being there, and I felt like I had more to learn. And so, but you get to, after 7 years, I think you get to a point where you're like, okay, I think it's time for something different, So I decided it was time to move on, and I decided I wanted to take a shot at opening my own business. And I gave Randy 6 months notice, and said, after the reining futurity, I think I'm going to move on. And he was kind enough to offer to let me stay there at Rancho Cerrillo and open my doors there and have horses there, at that facility. So that's where we launched. And, it immediately, because of the connections and the contacts that I had made from being out there for 7 years, I started to get horses pretty quickly. I mean, I think when I opened my doors, I had 15 or 16 in training, which that's quite a bit, when you're just getting started. But, I had some great people that, were willing to support me, and so I was so grateful for it. And we get about 2 months into this venture. It's like February of that year, and I'm riding a 2-year-old, and it stands up on its hind legs, and I don't think it meant to flip over, but it lost its balance and fell over. And when it did, it fell to the right, and I shattered my right arm.
Oh, no.
So I'm 2 months into my being a small business owner, entrepreneur, and all of a sudden I can't use my right arm. And, this is problematic because I haven't scaled up enough to where I have, an assistant trainer yet, or, I don't have a support staff, who can kind of cover for me while I get healed up. So, I mean, February of a horse's 2-year-old year, obviously you're still starting those things. You got to have 2 hands. Even your 3-year-olds, most often are still require 2 hands. So if I had, 16 in training, I remember vividly, I had one horse that was like an 11-year-old gelding that I could ride one-handed, right? And everything else was 2 or 3, and I needed both hands to be able to do any kind of, training. And I broke my arm on a Saturday, and on Monday morning, the gentleman who owned the 11-year-old gelding called me. He says, hey, I was really sorry to hear about your arm. I'm going to come pick my horse up and take him to so-and-so. It's like the one horse that I could have kept training, maybe, is the first one to go, but, very quickly, and then little by little, they all kind of started to go other places. I mean, I didn't have the kind of fracture that was going to, immediately remedy itself. They had to go in and do surgery and plates and screws and the whole thing. And I was frustrated and disappointed, but I totally understood where those clients were coming from, because they've got 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds that they have, they've got dreams for and hopes for, and they've got a training plan for, and those horses, they don't want those horses to fall behind. And so, they sent them other places, and they were all very kind and very well-meaning, and said, when you get healed up, give us a call, and, maybe we'll send it back. And of course, that never happens. They get settled someplace else, and it just, so I opened my own business and 60 days into it, I'm essentially out of business, right? And so now I'm at this crossroads in my life where I'm like, okay, I've just spent 7 years being an assistant trainer and just to get to this point, and now these clients aren't there and they're not coming back. What do I do? I'm almost 30 years old. It's time for me to, get some traction going. So I'm, weighing all these different options. Do I just take whatever I can get when people want to send me anything? That's always an option. And do I go back to being an assistant for somebody? It certainly, might not have hurt me, but at the time it just seemed a little deflating, Do I quit training horses altogether and move back home to California? What do I do here? And so I'd had a friend who had moved to North Texas and relocated there, and he needed some help getting some stuff hauled back out there. And he says, hey, I've got a truck, a trailer, and some furniture in Scottsdale. And I know you're not doing much, but what would you say if I paid you to drive that stuff out here and then I'll just, fly you back home or whatever? And I said, yeah, you're right. I don't have anything else going on and I could kind of use the money. So I did it, and I get to North Texas and I said, hey, when's my flight? And they said,
just kidding.
We haven't made it yet, but listen, just hang out. We'll be fine. We'll get you, crash at our place and whatever. And I'm like, okay, a day or two goes by. Hey, what about my flight? What do you got to go back to? I'm like, well, you're right. I kind of don't have a lot to go back to. So, hang out for another week or so. And sometime in that period, somebody said, there's a lady down there in Aubrey, and she's got a really nice place, but she lives in Dallas, and she's kind of an absentee owner, and she's looking for somebody to come in and kind of just be a ranch manager to give her some peace of mind and train her horses. And then, you can maybe have some of your own too. If you can build up your business, you ought to go talk to her. So I did, and she offered me the job. And so I went back to Arizona. I packed up all my stuff. I relocated to North Texas in September of 2008.
Wow.
And, the housing market collapsed, and then the financial system collapsed. And by Christmas, she was letting me know that, they were going to sell the ranch.
Oh, no.
And, that I was welcome to stay as long as they had the ranch, but when it sold, that they were going to, downsize. So I left there, and there was another lady not far from there who had a facility, needed a resident trainer. I went to work for her. She lasted about a year before things dried up, and same situation, and if I considered, quitting the horse training business when I broke my arm, I really considered it at that point, So I was kind of like, okay, I'm back to this conversation I'm having with myself a couple years ago. Do I go be an assistant horse trainer again, making, very little, working really long hours, because that's the nature of our industry. Do I just take whatever people will send me to ride? I don't really have a ton of connections here in North Texas. I mean, I do, but not like established clients. Or do I just, give up and say, hey, it wasn't meant to be, and go do something else, and made the decision that I'm just going to go do my own thing and take whatever people will send me and be the master of my own destiny, right? Because this working for other people sounded great, but it's just not working, and it's not their fault. Nobody knew that that situation, that the recession was going to be like that. But so that's what I did, Jim, is I just, I took whatever they would send me, and if it was a reining horse, if it was a trail riding horse, if it was a 2-year-old, if it was, I didn't train any mules or donkeys, but I would have. I just didn't know those kind of people.
They came with a check.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, it just sort of started. It just went from there. And, we found solid footing. I'm not going to say it was amazing, but we found solid footing. I reconnected with this gal named Kim Colvin, who I had known and met through my good friend Quincy Cahill. And Kim and Quincy were teammates at Texas A&M on the equestrian team together. And so when I worked for Randy, and we would, Quincy and I grew up showing with each other, and we'd see each other at the big shows and stuff like that. And then when I worked for Randy, I'd come back to, Texas and Oklahoma, 3-4 times a year for the big shows. And Quincy and I would always try to, catch up, or maybe we'd go to dinner in a group, and, her friend Kim was there or whatever. So in this time where I'm rebuilding, I get a phone call from my friend Quincy. She says, "Hey, you remember my friend Kim?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, she's looking for somebody to help her. She's got a wimpy gelding, and there's really nobody down. She's kind of in the Houston area, and right now there's just not anybody down there that can really help her." And I said, "Well, hey, I'll take what I can get. And, if it comes with a good looking blonde, that's even better." so, Kim and I reconnected, and she's been, a huge part of the growth of my business, because people are just, she's got a magnetic personality, and people are drawn to her. I am, not everyone recognizes this, I'm naturally introverted. So it's harder for me to be on all the time, but Kim's the extrovert, and she feeds off that stuff. And so she's been great about making it a warm, welcoming, fun environment to be part of. And so I think, again, I don't know that there was a magic moment. I mean, I guess there were many magical moments, but I don't know that there was like this one thing that really launched it. I think it was just a series of events, and I got very fortunate in some cases, and in other cases, it didn't go the way that we wanted, and that's life. But the horses that I have been fortunate enough to be around, they've not always been easy, but they have made me so much better as a horseman and a showman because of that. Romeo, as quote unquote easy as he is now, didn't start out that way, right? Little Trash Talk wasn't always the easiest. So many of those horses have, Double Tapping, who we haven't talked about very much. He's been another one that, Katie Fox found that horse as a 3-year-old and sent him to me, and she said, "He's a little weird," and she was not wrong. And, so I just like to point out that I'm so grateful to, Dan and Katie for sending that horse my way, but I have earned every dime they've paid me. I think we've talked about this before in some of our other interviews. He's the ultimate hero or zero, and to be fair, as he has gotten older, he's gotten a little bit better. Yes. So, but early on, I mean, we knew every time we walked into the show pen, one of two things was going to probably happen. He was going to be the winner and set the arena record, or he was going to be disqualified. There was not a lot of middle ground there. But again, that's a horse that, I'm so grateful to have in my life. And he's again, I'm sure this has been a common theme on this show, right? The great ones are all just a little
quirky.
Different and quirky and weird, and they all have those things, right? And Romeo snores like a chainsaw and slips out of his halter every chance he gets. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot turn your back on that horse in the cross ties, because he will be out of that halter and gone, right? Like, I mean, so let me just, while we're on that note, fun fact, we found this out the other day. So Romeo, when he was born in Nova Scotia, Canada, they gave him the name Flash, hence Sumac gonna be flashy, right?
Yep.
They send him off, and Matt Hudson gets him as a 2-year-old. He's still a stud colt at the time. Somewhere in the middle of the night, Romeo, probably, I don't know if he was in a halter, but he got out of his stall, breeds a mare, and subsequently Matt renames him Romeo. Right? So Romeo's a gelding now, but he's also a sire.
Oh my gosh, adds to the quirkiness.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure everybody who's been on your podcast has said the same thing. thing. But
absolutely, every single one of them.
The double tapping has been, another one of those horses. He's got a bright future. He has these intangibles that you cannot train into a horse. Either they have it or they don't. And especially for the ranch classes, he's a great mover. He's great with his expression.
Mm-hmm.
That's the double-edged sword, right? I mean, the ones that are a little looky,
yes.
They have great expression, which is highly valued in our ranch classes.
Yeah.
The downside is they're a little unfocused sometimes, or you feel like they're not really connected, with you. And so, that horse, when I first started showing him, he would hold his breath just the entire time we were in the show pen. I mean, it just, his abdomen was like a rock,
Oh my gosh.
And he was unconfident and insecure. And I think that's the part that as he's gotten older, he's just learned to relax and be more confident and trust us and understand that, we're never going to put him in a bad position, so he's been really fun to have. And, the sky's the limit for that horse. I mean, he's only, I think, 7 years old this year. So, he's still relatively young for a ranch horse. And, both those horses, Romeo and LJ, they have the chance to still be showing 10 years from now, the way that the ranch events are going. So, we've been very, very fortunate. And, but it wasn't always a smooth, completely linear path.
Was it?
Yeah. So.
Isn't LJ also the one that Katie kind of tries to compete with you on scoring and in the amateur versus the open?
Yeah.
And so the first thing she asks when she comes out, what was my score? 'Cause you can't hear very well in that arena. And she's like, as long as I beat Bud, that's all that matters. She didn't care. She didn't care she was first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, I love that mentality.
I know.
I love that mentality.
She's very competitive.
That's the mentality I would love all my riders to have, and quite frankly, Katie has had a pile of success on that horse. She was the winner of the amateur ranch riding on double tapping last year. I think we were Logan Pluhar, who works for me, was second in the senior ranch trail on him, and I was third in the senior ranch riding on him. And to be to have the ability to be that consistent at that level is
with three different riders
and be successful in, the working Western rail as well. I mean, that's the horse we're all shopping for, that we all hope to have come into our lives. And I've been very fortunate to have several of those come into my life. But yeah, Katie, we do have a little bit of ongoing, kind of where we like to poke each other a little bit. And I think that I love it. I mean, if that's what it takes to get her to perform at her best, then I'm all for it, so.
And it makes it more fun.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, to be clear, I mean, their success is my success.
Absolutely.
Right. And I'm competitive as well. And I always want to be, the one holding up that gold globe. But I also take an immense amount of pride in seeing my youth kids accomplish those goals and accomplish their dreams, and my amateurs and select amateurs find that level of success, and the staff that works for me, being able to achieve that same level of success. I think I'm at the point now in my career where, I've been fortunate enough to win, and I say this with the utmost humility, but I've won almost everything there is to win in the ranch events. And so now the reason I say that, my focus is now shifting, I think, on some level to, what can I do to help strengthen this part, this discipline and this part of the industry for the people coming behind me?
Yep.
And to be clear, I'm not retiring or anything. Like, let's
there
not go
are
down.
records to be broken.
Yeah. We got lots of things left to accomplish, but I do think that at some point, I think my focus, I'm starting now to get to the point where I'm thinking about, like, what is this industry going to look like 10 years from now, and what is it going to look like 20 years from now? And I want there to be a place for Logan Pluhar to be able to go and make a living and compete and continue to have these great horses and develop these great horses I want there to be a place for, these youth kids to grow as amateurs. And I want, the future youth kids to be able to come in and have a strong industry and a strong association and, be able to accomplish those things that we've been able to accomplish. So for me, the perspective has shifted just slightly. And now it's not about what can I accomplish anymore on as far as the wins. It's more about, what can I do to help strengthen the discipline in the industry for the people that are coming after me.
I think there's one horse that I have in my head that we haven't really talked about, and that's Chilling Like a Villain.
Whew, you saved me. Because my wife... Oof,
that's Kim's horse, isn't
it? Becky? All right. So let me say two things. Firstly, if I had gotten off this podcast without mentioning Chilling Like a Villain, that would have been the first thing I would have heard of. Yes. Kim couldn't come with me. She got sick, and so she got knocked down by something and wasn't able to make the trip. But otherwise, she'd probably be sitting right over there,
poking you.
Oh yeah, letting me know everything I messed up. But no. Chilling Like a Villain is another one of those stories that, to me, it could have gone so many other directions. The fact that he ended up in my barn and in my life is, it's just, I guess all the things coming together, the universe said, we're going to do that. But that's a horse that a friend of ours named Rebecca Cates raised, and he's by Spooks Got a Whiz. And she raised this colt, and she sent him to me, and she said, I've got this colt, and I'll send him to you, and we'll train him up and see where it goes. So we put about a year on him, and I said, Miss Becky, I think this is a nice colt, and we need to keep going. And unfortunately, Rebecca's husband passed away, and I think, she was at a place in her life where she just felt, obviously grief, but,
yes,
overwhelmed by the things that, all the things that I would assume a person goes through when you have to sort of, navigate those waters.
Yep.
And so, she said, I think I want to take this horse and just take him home. I think I just need to do something different with him. And I said, I can't, I said, I really don't want you to do that. I said, let me, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. I know you're going through a lot, but don't let this be the thing that you stress over. I said, I will work with you on the financial part of it, and, I won't speak for her, but what I assume happened is that she just, whatever was going on in her world, she just felt like she needed to make a change and take this horse somewhere else. And, I kept asking her not to, and I just didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. So I came home a little frustrated, and I, was venting to Kim, and I said, Kim, she sure likes you. Why don't you go talk to her and see if you can just talk her off the ledge a little bit, and just, really, I don't want that colt to leave the barn, And I left it at that. 2 hours later, my wife comes back and says, got it done. We own him. And
he's mine now.
Wait, hold on.
That's not where I was
say
going.
Buy him. I said, talk her off the ledge. And let's try to keep him in the barn. I said, I could have thought of a dozen different ways we could have handled that situation. She says, well, you told me to handle it. By golly, I did. So, yeah, so Chilling Like a Villain is he goes by the name Storm. I guess where how he was born. But Storm is a horse that again, I didn't see any of that coming, but he's been such a blessing to Kim and I on so many numerous ways. But he started out, our primary focus was to do the reining on him, and we knew as a 3-year-old, he seemed like he was, fairly exceptional. We knew that because we had a lot of people come try to buy him from us.
Oh, yep.
And, when the public asks you multiple times over, and high level trainers keep asking you and encouraging you just to throw out a number, you've got something, right? I mean, that's self-explanatory. I personally said, hey, let's take the money, because as the professional and the business owner, I know those opportunities don't come around every day, and the best time to sell one is when somebody's asking to buy it, in my opinion, and so, but every time it came up, Kim got a little kind of, she got a little pouty, and so I got a little exasperated, and obviously we never sold him. But I'm not even going to tell you how much money we turned down. It makes me sick. But thankfully, I mean, he makes, us so happy, and he makes Kim so happy, and he's gone on to have, a great reining career. He's still got a great, reining career ahead of him. He's made the finals at, some of the major NRHA events, and then we transitioned him into the ranch classes. And he went to the Congress the first year. We showed him 3 times, and I had a broken leg.
Yes.
And, he won all 3 classes we showed him in at the Congress. We took him to the NSBA World, and he wins the the Ranch on the Rail at the NSBA World, and then he goes to the World Show this year and wins the Junior Ranch Trail and sets the record there. So, makes me. It's hard. It's a bitter pill to swallow to say that she was right. And I still think we should have taken the money, but some of that wound has been, has healed over a little bit. And at this point, I guess we're going to go with the happy wife, happy life, philosophy.
That's exactly right.
I had some friends from France that came and visited us a while back, and I used that colloquialism, and the husband kind of looked at me, and I kind of explained to him. He goes, I get it. He says, but in France, we have something like that, but we say it differently. We say, what a woman wants, God wants. Kim loves that.
That's a t-shirt.
Right? So, yeah, no, but Storm is, again, he's 6 years old this year, and he's hopefully got his best years ahead of him. So we're very fortunate to have a stockpile of horses that are, very exceptional. We're very grateful for that. So.
Have we left any horses out?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at my list here.
Because there is a list.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about Checks Out My Dough?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great one.
Carrie's horse?
Yep.
That's what I thought.
So Checks Out My Dough is owned by Carrie Pappendick, and that's a horse that also had a really long, really successful reining career. And he was sent to me by somebody in my area who said, we feel like our best reining days are probably behind us with this horse, and we know he can still go out there and be, consistent and mark 72s. But, for us and the levels, the categories that we're eligible for, that doesn't win you as much these days. And so, we were wondering if you would want to try him for the ranch classes. And I immediately said yes, because I had actually tried to buy that horse several years earlier for a client who saw him and said, hey, what about that one? And I said, yeah, let's try it. And we weren't able to get the deal done at that time. So when it kind of came full circle and he came back into my sphere, I didn't have to hesitate. And that horse, I didn't have him there very long. Carrie was a client, and Carrie had a different horse in training. And of course, we all know that Carrie owned the most successful Western riding horse of all time in Harley D. Zip, right? And Harley D. Zip was big and bay and beautiful, and Checks Out My Dough is big and bay and beautiful. And I won't say that I used that to my advantage, but I'm not saying I didn't use it to my advantage either.
You just knew it might pull a few strings.
I just said, hey, do you know anybody who might be interested in this horse? And then I pulled him out of the stall, and of course, the rest is history.
She melted.
So Checks Out My Dough, really, really good-minded. Great foundation on him. It's hard not to like that horse. It's hard not to want to watch him when he travels, because he's such a pretty mover. Logan Pluhar, again, who works for me, Logan won the senior ranch riding on him a couple years ago, and I could not have been more excited for Logan. I think that, she works so hard and she's very talented. And so that was actually a really fun year for me because I was 4th in the senior ranch riding that year, which does not live up to the standard of excellence that I have set for myself. But the winner was Logan, which checks out my dough. And second place was Leslie Lang on the Immortal. And let's see, I think my friend Ryan Kale was 3rd. So, all 3 of those people.
Tough class.
Yeah, all 3 of those people, if you're going to get beat, getting beat by your friends is a great way to have to be 4th. And of course, the fact that the horse that won was still under my umbrella, made it even better. So I think that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. These days, we have a luxury of riches in the ranch classes, but we also have, these really talented assistants, and being able to give them opportunity and see them flourish gives me as much satisfaction as anything. So, lately I've been, throwing out the phrase that, hey, as long as it's something in my barn, I don't care.
Family.
I don't care who the winner is, so. But yeah, that horse checks out my dough, again, he's still going, and I'm sure he's got a lot of winning left to do. So we were very grateful, for the success that he brought our program.
Just out of curiosity, how many, let's say assistant trainers do you have now?
I have 4 riders working underneath me, and my personal philosophy is to try to keep 1 rider for every 10 horses. Okay. So the reason why we do that, we have the system that has seemed to work for us, and we figure that, 1 rider ought to be able to get through 10 horses a day if you're averaging 1 hour per horse. So, hypothetically, if work starts at 7 in the morning, from the time that horse comes out of the stall to the time it goes back into the stall, it averages 1 hour. Right now, some might take an hour and a half, some might take 30 minutes, just depends on the horse, depends on the time of year, depends on, whether we got a horse show staring us in the face. Is it a young horse, old horse? All those things factor into that. But, if work starts at 7 and, you ride 5 and then take an hour for lunch, come back at 1 o'clock and ride another 5, that seems like a reasonable and efficient way to do things. So that's kind of been the strategy that we've employed the last few years to the best of our ability. And it seems to be the magic formula.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So we have a theme or a motto that we're using in our public relations and marketing of AQHA, America's original horsepower. So how would you define America's original horsepower?
How would I define that? I would say that America's original horsepower comes with a sense of history and tradition. And I think that it comes with not only horsepower in the sense of, high achieving horses, but it could be defined as horsepower in terms of the connections that it creates amongst those of us in the industry, and the fulfillment and enjoyment that it can provide. I think, certainly in its most literal terms, you could say the horsepower talks about, the ability of the quarter horse, to do racing, to do roping, to do, the speed events, but, the versatility of the horse to do all the different things that it was originally intended to do and that we have selectively bred it to do. So that's a convoluted answer to a very simple question. I'm going to think on that.
It's not that simple, really. So, yeah. We have a lot of people kind of just stop and have to think about it. So, yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
So
I should have asked for notes before we started.
What do you got? Now I don't remember. You ask it.
Okay, so last question for the podcast is, how do you define a good horse? What is a good horse to you?
I think a good horse is any horse that touches your soul. I think that it doesn't have to be a performance horse. It doesn't have to be a show horse. It doesn't have to be a riding horse. It's whatever horse completes you or brings you fulfillment and enjoyment and stirs your passion for the equine industry.
Amen.
But thanks.
Well, thank you.
This was fun.
I feel like I did way too much talking.
Oh,
I should have let you talk more.
No, it's your horses. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I do very much appreciate the opportunity to come on. I've been watching you guys online and on social media, and I've been pouting that I didn't get the invitation. So when I finally did get it, I felt very validated. So.
And when you were with a lot of things going on, this worked out really well. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it's been fun. We're obviously here for the convention, and I was running for a Texas director position, but this has been a nice reprieve to not have to think about some of that other stuff
there you go.
For a few minutes. So I appreciate the opportunity to sit with you guys.
Thanks to our friends at Platinum Performance Equine for supporting this episode. Platinum Performance Equine was developed by a veterinarian in 1996 to support healing and overall horse wellness. Each bucket equals thousands of hours of research and some of the finest ingredients available in the forms most bioavailable to your horse. Today it's trusted by horsemen like Bud, who uses Platinum Performance GI as his wellness formula. This advanced digestive formula supports total body health through the gut, where 70 to 80% of a horse's immune system lives, with omega-3 fats, antioxidants, vitamins, trace minerals, biosponge, prebiotics, probiotics, and glutamine. It supports everything from digestion to performance. It's even eligible for up to $15,000 in colic surgery reimbursement through Platinum Colic coverage. Learn more at platinumperformance.com or call 800-553-2400.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the horses we discussed in this episode, visit aqha.com/goodhorses. There you can explore the pedigrees, performance achievements, breeding history, and much more. It's the perfect place to dig deeper and stay connected with the American Quarter Horse. Don't forget to subscribe for updates and follow AQHA on social media.